The compound gate trembled under the weight of 40 years of silence. Corporal Natalie Kincaid moved through the forward operating base like smoke through ruins, her boots making no sound against the packed Afghan dirt. 28 years old, unnoticed by design, she carried breakfast trays to men who would never see her as anything more than the woman who fed them. The morning sun had not yet burned away the night's chill, and in that gray hour before full daylight, she was a ghost among warriors. The mess hall of FOB Sentinel sat squat and defiant against the Hindu Kush Mountains, its corrugated metal walls scarred by dust storms, and the occasional pot shot from insurgents testing their luck. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of coffee, scrambled eggs, and the particular brand of arrogance that came with being a Navy SEAL operating in hostile territory. Petty Officer First Class Dalton Shaw sat at the corner table, his plate already half empty, his mouth running at full capacity. "Hey, Ghost Girl, these eggs are runny. You gonna fix that or just stand there looking pretty?" His buddies laughed. The sound echoed off the metal walls like gunfire. Natalie said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was armor. She collected his plate without meeting his eyes, her face a mask of professional indifference. But her peripheral vision cataloged everything. Shaw's dominant hand, right, the knife he kept strapped to his calf, visible when he shifted his weight, the way his shoulders favored his left side, an old injury compensated for, but never fully healed. Information, always gathering information, always unobserved while she did it. "Appreciate it, sweetheart," Shaw called after her. "Maybe stick to cooking. Leave the tactical stuff to the professionals." More laughter. Staff Sergeant Garrett Thorne walked in as Natalie headed back to the kitchen, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought he might say something. He was the ranking, non-commissioned officer with most of the team out on patrol. He had authority. He had the power to stop this. Thorne glanced at Shaw, then at Natalie. Then he smiled. Just a little. Just enough to let her know whose side he was on. She pushed through the kitchen door and let it swing shut behind her. Alone among the industrial stoves and steel prep tables, Natalie released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands moved automatically, scraping plates, loading the industrial dishwasher, her mind already somewhere else, somewhere 12 years and 7,000 miles away. The ranch in Nebraska had been her sanctuary. Natalie had been 16 when she first understood that high school was a war zone where she had no weapons. They called her Ghost Girl because she moved through hallways without making friends, without making noise, without making any impression at all. She was the girl that teachers forgot to call on, the one who sat alone at lunch, the one whose absence from a party would never be noticed because she was never invited in the first place. The bullying was not the dramatic kind that made headlines. It was subtler, crueler, the kind that happened in whispers and exclusions, in group chats she was not part of, in inside jokes she would never understand. The kind that made her feel like she was fading, becoming more transparent with each passing day. She had come home one October afternoon with tears she refused to let fall, and her grandfather had been waiting on the porch of his ranch, 30 miles outside of town. Master Gunnery Sergeant Wyatt Kincaid, 70 years old and still straight-backed as a fence post, had taken one look at her face and made a decision. "Come with me." They had walked in silence across the property, past the main house, past the barn, out to where the land opened up into rolling hills of prairie grass. He had not asked what was wrong. Wyatt Kincaid was not a man who wasted words. Instead, he had handed her a rifle, a Remington 700, civilian model, chambered in .308 Winchester. The stock was worn smooth from decades of use. The bluing on the barrel faded to gray in places. It was not a showpiece. It was a tool that had been used. "You see that target?" Wyatt had pointed to a paper square stapled to a wooden frame 100 yards distant. "I want you to hit it." Natalie had never fired a gun before. Her father, Wyatt's son, had moved to Omaha when she was 8 and rarely looked back. Guns were not part of her world, but her grandfather's hands had been steady and patient as he showed her how to load the rifle, how to settle the stock against her shoulder, how to find the target through the iron sights. Breathe in, let half of it out. Hold, squeeze, don't pull. The rifle had kicked against her shoulder like a living thing. The sound had been enormous, a physical force that pressed against her chest. And 100 yards away, the paper target had sprouted a hole dead center. Wyatt had said nothing for a long moment. Then he had taken the rifle from her shaking hands and studied her face like he was reading a map. "Well," he said finally, "I'll be damned." That had been the beginning. Every weekend for the next 4 years, while her classmates went to football games and parties and all the normal rituals of adolescence, Natalie drove her old Ford Ranger out to her grandfather's ranch. And every weekend, Wyatt Kincaid taught her things that most people would never learn. He taught her that shooting was not about strength. It was about patience, about control, about the ability to make your body do exactly what your mind commanded, no matter what your emotions were screaming. He taught her to read wind by watching grass and dust, to calculate distance by comparing known sizes, to estimate bullet drop across hundreds of yards by understanding physics and trajectory and 1,000 small variables that could make the difference between a hit and a miss. He taught her that the best snipers were not the ones with the strongest arms or the loudest voices. They were the ones who could disappear, who could wait for hours without moving, who could take the shot that mattered and then vanish like they had never been there at all. Being unseen is not weakness, he told her on a cold November morning when she was 17, after she had successfully hit a target at 500 yards for the first time. Being unseen is the most powerful weapon you will ever have. The enemy cannot kill what they cannot see. Natalie had learned that Wyatt Kincaid was not just some retired Marine. He was a legend in circles that did not advertise their legends. From 1965 to 1990, he had trained the deadliest snipers in the United States Marine Corps. His students had operated in Grenada when the Rangers jumped in to rescue medical students, in Panama when Noriega's regime fell, in the deserts of Iraq when Saddam's army discovered that distance was no protection. Wyatt never talked about his own missions. Those were classified, buried under layers of government secrecy that would outlive him. But sometimes, late at night when the training was done and they sat on the porch drinking coffee, he would tell her about the men he had taught, the shots they had made, the lives they had saved. "War is not about glory," he said once, his voice rough as gravel. "It is about making the hard choice when the hard choice is all you have left, and then living with it." By the time Natalie was 18, she could outshoot most of the instructors at the local shooting range. By 19, she was making shots at 700 yards that would have impressed professional competitors. By 20, she had surpassed her grandfather's own skills, though neither of them ever said it out loud. The day she turned 21, Wyatt had called her out to the range one last time. The wind was kicking up dust devils across the property, and 850 yards distant, he had set up a target no bigger than a dinner plate. "Make the shot," he said. Natalie had settled into position behind his old M40A5, the same rifle he had carried in 3 different wars, the same rifle that had been present for kills that would never make it into any official record. She felt the wind on her face, calculated the drift, adjusted for the distance and the slight downward angle. She breathed in, let half of it out, held. The rifle spoke. 850 yards away, the target disintegrated. Wyatt Kincaid, a man who had seen combat across 4 decades and trained warriors who became ghosts in the night, had wrapped his granddaughter in his arms and wept. "You are better than I ever was," he whispered. "You are going to save lives I could not." 6 months later, Natalie joined the Navy. 3 months after that, Wyatt Kincaid was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The disease had moved through him like a wildfire through dry grass. The man who could hold a rifle steady for 6 hours waiting for a target could not hold a coffee cup without shaking. The hands that had guided Natalie through 1,000 perfect shots trembled and betrayed him. But his mind stayed sharp until the end. Natalie had been home on leave when he called her to the ranch one final time. It was March, and the prairie was just beginning to wake from winter. Wyatt sat on the porch in a wheelchair he hated, wrapped in blankets despite the afternoon sun. On his lap sat the M40A5. "This rifle has saved more lives than I can count," he said. His voice was thin now, stripped down to its essential components. "It went with me to Grenada, to Panama, to the Iraqi desert. Men are alive today because of what this weapon and I did together." He lifted it with shaking hands and held it out to her. "Now it is yours. Take it, use it. And when the time comes, when you have to make the choice between staying unseen and stepping into the light, you will know what to do." Natalie had taken the rifle. The weight of it was familiar, but now it carried something more. History, legacy, the accumulated weight of all the lives it had protected. "I am not allowed to have this," she said. "Navy regulations." Wyatt smiled. It was the smile of a man who had spent his life working in the shadows of regulations in official channels. "Then I guess you will just have to be unseen about it." He died 2 weeks later. On a Tuesday morning when the wind was blowing from the west and the sky was the color of gunmetal, Natalie had been holding his hand when he went, and his last words had been so quiet she almost missed them. "Be the shot they never see coming." The Navy had been everything Natalie expected and nothing she hoped for. She enlisted with Wyatt's training burning in her blood and his rifle hidden in her personal effects. She scored a 99 out of 100 on the marksmanship qualification, the second highest score in naval history. Her drill instructors noted her exceptional ability, recommended advanced training, and then she was assigned to food service. She applied for Scout Sniper School during her first year. Application denied. Insufficient experience. She applied again during her second year, after proving herself in basic combat training, after qualifying expert with every weapon system they gave her. Application denied. Physical requirements not met. She applied a third time during her fourth year, after deploying to Afghanistan as part of a support unit, after volunteering for every dangerous duty she could find. Application denied. Current assignment critical to unit cohesion. The fourth time, she did not even receive a formal denial. Just a note from her commanding officer, Staff Sergeant Garrett Thorne, suggesting that she focus on the valuable contributions she was already making. That cooking was an essential skill. That not everyone was cut out for combat roles. That she should stick to her strengths. So Natalie Kincaid had remained unnoticed. She cooked meals and cleaned weapons and stood watches that other people did not want. She endured the jokes and the dismissals and the casual contempt of men who could not imagine that the woman serving them breakfast might be more dangerous than they would ever be. And all the while she carried Wyatt's M40A5 in a locked case in her personal locker, hidden under winter clothes and spare uniforms. Against regulations, against orders, a piece of her grandfather that she could not bear to leave behind, waiting for the moment he had promised would come, the moment when being unseen would no longer be enough. FOB. Sentinel sat in the Helmand province of Afghanistan like a splinter in the flesh of the earth. It was not a large base, 60 personnel on a good day, half that when patrols were running. The perimeter was a collection of HESCO barriers and concertina wire, guard towers at the corners, a motor pool for the vehicles, and the essential buildings clustered in the center like organs in a body. Natalie had been stationed there for 4 months, long enough to know the rhythms of the place, long enough to map every inch of it in her mind. The mess hall sat on the eastern side, the armory to the north, a reinforced concrete structure that held enough weapons and ammunition to fight a small war. The barracks to the west, the command center and communications building to the south, its roof flat and accessible, offering clear lines of sight to the surrounding terrain. She had not consciously planned for a firefight, but Wyatt had trained her to see the world tactically, and some habits ran too deep to turn off. From the communications building roof, she calculated, you could cover the north ridge at 620 yards, the east approach at 580, the south bunker at 720. Wind typically came from the west in the afternoons, shifting to southwest in the evenings. Temperature dropped 15 degrees after sunset, which would affect bullet trajectory at extreme ranges. Information. Always gathering information. Always preparing for possibilities that would probably never come. Probably. It was a Tuesday evening when Lieutenant Commander Rex Mallory briefed the team on the upcoming patrol. Natalie was in the kitchen, prepping for dinner, but she could hear every word through the thin walls. Mallory's voice carried the particular confidence of a SEAL officer who had never encountered a problem he could not shoot his way out of. Intel suggests increased insurgent activity in the villages to the north. We are going to run a presence patrol, remind them who controls this territory. I will take Alpha and Bravo squads. Thorne, you will hold the FOB with a skeleton crew. Thorne's voice cautious. Sir, that leaves us pretty thin if something kicks off here. The insurgents do not have the capability to mass an assault on this base. And if they try, air support is 15 minutes out. You will be fine. Natalie paused in her work, a knife motionless above a cutting board. Something in that assessment felt wrong. Not tactically wrong, exactly. Just wrong in the way that Wyatt had taught her to trust her instincts. She finished prepping dinner, served it, cleaned up after. And when the base had settled into its evening routine, she did something she had never done before. She went to the security office. The guard on duty was a young private named Hayes, barely 20 years old and so new to the country that he still jumped at distant gunfire. Can I use the monitor? Natalie asked. I thought I saw something on my way from the mess hall. Hayes shrugged. Sure, Corporal, but the cameras have been glitchy all week. The security system for FOB Sentinel consisted of 8 cameras covering the perimeter and the main gate. Natalie scrolled through the feeds, her trained eye picking apart the darkness beyond the wire. At first, nothing. Just empty desert, scattered rocks, the kind of landscape that looked the same in every direction. Then she saw it. On camera 6, which covered the northeast approach, a shadow moved wrong. Too deliberate, too careful. A man in local dress, keeping to the low ground, watching the base with the patience of someone conducting reconnaissance. Natalie felt her pulse tick up. She switched to camera 3. Another figure, this one on the eastern approach, also watching. Waiting. She checked the timestamp. Both figures had appeared within the last 30 minutes. After Mallory had taken 3/4 of the combat personnel on patrol. Hayes, do you see this? The private leaned in, squinted at the screen. I mean, maybe? Could just be locals. They pass through sometimes. 2 of them? After dark? Positioned on opposite sides of the base? Hayes shrugged again, the universal gesture of someone who had not yet learned that small details could mean the difference between life and death. You want me to report it? Natalie considered. Report it to whom? Thorne? The man who had dismissed every suggestion she had ever made? Who thought her contributions began and ended with meal preparation? She made a decision. No, I will handle it. Back in her quarters, Natalie sat on her bunk and thought through probabilities. Maybe the figures were nothing. Local civilians, farmers, nomads passing through on routes they had used for 1,000 years. Or maybe they were scouts, watching, counting personnel, noting the reduced security, reporting back to whoever was planning to take advantage of a weakened base. Wyatt's voice in her memory. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and when the worst comes, be the one they never saw coming. Natalie opened her locker, moved aside the winter clothes and spare uniforms, and pulled out the case containing Wyatt's M40A5. The rifle was exactly as she remembered. 50 inches long, 11 pounds empty, chambered in 7.62 NATO, effective range of 800 yards in the right hands. The stock showed wear from decades of use, but the barrel was still flawless. Wyatt had maintained this weapon like some men maintain marriages. She had brought it to Afghanistan knowing it violated regulations, knowing she could face disciplinary action if anyone found out. But she had also known, with the certainty that came from 4 years of training under a man who understood war better than most people understood peace, that she might need it. Natalie disassembled the rifle, checked every component. The bolt moved smoothly. The barrel showed no signs of fouling. The scope, a loopholed Mark IV that Wyatt had installed himself, was still properly zeroed. She reassembled it, loaded 2 10-round magazines with M118 LR ammunition. And then she did something that surprised her. She wrote a letter. "Dear Grandpa Wyatt, if I do not make it through tomorrow, I want you to know that everything you taught me mattered. The shooting, yes, but more than that, the way you saw me when no one else did. The way you believed I was more than what the world said I was. I am not scared of dying. You taught me that death comes for everyone, and the only question is whether we meet it doing something that matters. If tomorrow is my day, I will meet it on my feet, with your rifle in my hands, doing exactly what you trained me to do. Thank you for making me unseen in all the ways that matter. Thank you for teaching me to be the shot they never see coming. I love you. I miss you. Nat." She folded the letter and tucked it into the case with the rifle. Then she lay down on her bunk, fully clothed, and waited for whatever the morning would bring. Sleep did not come. Outside, the Afghan night pressed against the walls of FOB Sentinel like something alive. And somewhere in that darkness, people were watching, planning, preparing to test the defenses of a base that had just lost 3/4 of its combat power. Natalie stared at the ceiling and counted her heartbeats, and thought about all the overlooked girls who had ever been dismissed and told to stay in their place. Tomorrow, she thought, might be the day that changed. The sun would rise in 6 hours, and when it did, Corporal Natalie Kincaid would either remain unseen forever, or she would step into the light in a way that no one would ever forget. She closed her eyes, controlled her breathing, and waited for the sound of mortars that her instincts told her were already being positioned in the hills. The last thing she thought before exhaustion finally pulled her under was a memory of her grandfather's hands, steady and sure, guiding her aim toward a target she could not yet see. When the moment comes, Wyatt had told her once, you will not have time to think. You will only have time to do what I taught you. Trust the training. Trust yourself. And remember that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one nobody sees coming. The moment was coming. Natalie could feel it in her bones. And when it arrived, she would be ready. The first mortar round struck at 0347 hours. In the deepest part of the night, Natalie was already awake, had been for hours, when the explosion tore through the communications building, ripping metal and concrete into fragments that screamed through the darkness like dying stars. The shockwave rattled her window, and before the sound had fully registered, she was moving. Training took over. The training that had started on a Nebraska ranch when she was 16. The training that lived deeper than conscious thought, embedded in muscle memory and reflex. She grabbed the rifle case, threw on her tactical vest that she had prepared the night before, magazines already loaded and secured, boots laced in 15 seconds, out the door while the alarm sirens were still winding up to their full wail. The compound had transformed into hell. Muzzle flashes lit the perimeter like demonic fireflies, winking in and out of existence along the ridgelines to the north, east, and south. Tracer rounds drew luminous lines through the pre-dawn darkness, geometry of death sketched in red and green. The distinctive crack of AK-47 fire mixed with the deeper thunder of PKM machine guns, and underneath it all, the steady crump, crump, crump of mortar rounds walking across the base. Natalie pressed herself against the barracks wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had trained for this, prepared for this, but training happened on sunny afternoons in Nebraska, and preparation was a mental exercise. This was real. The air smelled of cordite and burning diesel. Men were screaming. Through the chaos, she heard Thorne's voice on the radio, high and tight with stress. All personnel, combat positions. We are under attack from multiple directions. I repeat, we are under attack. Another mortar round hit the motor pool. A Humvee erupted in flames, orange light painting the compound in flickering shadows. In that moment of illumination, Natalie saw the tactical situation with crystalline clarity. Thorne was at the north wall, already bleeding from shrapnel wounds to his head and shoulder. His rifle hung forgotten in one hand while he tried to key his radio with the other, coordination failing under the pressure of pain and shock. Dalton Shaw and two other SEALs had taken position behind an MRAP near the main gate, but they were pinned down by machine gun fire from the East Ridge. Every time one of them tried to move, bullets chewed the dirt around their position. Shaw's face was visible in the muzzle flash, and for the first time since Natalie had known him, she saw genuine fear. The fourth SEAL, Williams, lay motionless near the guard tower, not moving, possibly not breathing. 4 defenders, maybe 3 if Williams was gone. Against how many attackers? Natalie forced herself to think tactically. The firing positions suggested at least 40 insurgents, possibly more. 3 main assault elements converging on the base from different directions, with mortar support from the hills. This was not a probing attack. This was an assault meant to overrun the position completely. The math was simple and brutal. 4 defenders against 40 attackers. Maybe 10 minutes before the perimeter was breached. Maybe less. She looked down at the rifle case in her hands. Wyatt's M40A5. The weapon that had saved lives in 3 different wars. The weapon that was not supposed to be here. That violated regulations she had sworn to follow. The weapon that might be the only thing standing between everyone in this base and death. "I am not ready for this, Grandpa," she whispered. But even as she said it, her hands were opening the case. Muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions. The rifle came together in her grip like it had been waiting for this moment. She attached the scope, inserted a 10-round magazine, cycled the bolt, chambered around. From inside the armory, she heard the sound of men shouting, trying to organize a defense with personnel who were not there. Someone was calling for air support. Someone else was screaming about ammunition. Natalie made her decision. She ran, not toward the fighting, toward the communications building, the one with the flat roof and clear lines of sight. The one she had identified 4 months ago as the perfect sniper position, and then dismissed the thought because she was just a cook, and cooks did not think about sniper positions. The building's entrance had been damaged by the mortar strike, the door hanging at an angle. She slipped through, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris. The interior stairwell was intact. She took the steps 3 at a time, the rifle banging against her leg. The roof access door resisted for a moment, then gave way. And suddenly, Natalie Kincaid was standing in the open air with a war raging around her and a rifle in her hands, and absolutely no one who knew she was there. The position was everything she had calculated it would be. The raised parapet provided cover while allowing firing positions through gaps in the concrete. The height gave her clear sight lines to every approach, and the darkness, just beginning to give way to pre-dawn gray, would make her undetectable to anyone looking up from ground level. She moved to the northern edge and settled into a prone position that Wyatt had made her practice until she could do it in her sleep. Rifle butt seated firmly in the pocket of her shoulder, left hand supporting the forend, right cheek welded to the stock, eye aligned with the scope. Through the loopholed optic, the world sharpened into deadly clarity. 650 yards to the north ridge, she could see the muzzle flash of the insurgent sniper who was systematically targeting anyone who tried to move in the compound. He was positioned behind a rocky outcrop, professional in his movements, disciplined in his fire. While she watched, he shifted aim and fired. In the compound below, one of the SEALs by the MRAP jerked and screamed. Shaw's voice carried across the base. "Sniper! "We have a sniper on the North Ridge." Natalie centered the crosshairs on the distant figure. At this range, in this light, with the wind that she could feel on her face but not accurately measure, the shot would be difficult. Not impossible. Wyatt had trained her for shots exactly like this. But Wyatt had trained her on paper targets, on steel silhouettes, on distant rocks in wooden frames, never on a human being. Her finger rested on the trigger. The insurgent sniper was lining up another shot, completely unaware that he was in someone else's crosshairs. Young, she could see that much through the scope. Maybe 22, 23 years old. Someone's son, possibly someone's father. A man who was about to kill Shaw or one of the others if she did not stop him. Natalie's hands began to shake. All the training in the world could not prepare you for the moment when you had to look at another human being through a scope and make the decision to end their life. Wyatt had told her that, even after decades of combat, that moment never became easy, never became routine. "Taking a life is the heaviest thing you will ever do," he had said once, late at night on the ranch porch. "And if it ever becomes light, if it ever becomes easy, then you have lost something essential. You have become something less than human." She remembered asking him, "How did you do it?" the first time. Wyatt had been quiet for a long time. Then, "I threw up after, shook for an hour, questioned everything I believed about myself. And then I had to do it again the next day, because that is what war is. Not glory, not honor, just the terrible mathematics of who lives and who dies, and the knowledge that if I did not make that choice, someone on my side would pay the price." In the compound below, Shaw screamed again. "We need overwatch. Where the hell is our sniper support?" Natalie's finger trembled on the trigger. 650 yards away, the insurgent sniper settled behind his rifle for another shot. She closed her eyes, breathed, remembered Wyatt's hands guiding hers, his voice cutting through the fear. "Doubt will get you killed. Trust the training. Do what must be done." She opened her eyes, centered the crosshairs, calculated wind drift, bullet drop, the slight upward angle of the shot, breathed in, let half of it out, held, squeezed. The M40A5 bucked against her shoulder with familiar force. The sharp report cracked across the compound, lost in the general chaos of the firefight. And 650 yards away, through the scope, Natalie watched her bullet impact 3 inches to the right of the insurgent sniper's head, throwing up a spray of rock fragments. A miss. The insurgent jerked in surprise, turning to locate the source of the shot. His rifle swung in her direction. 3 seconds, maybe 4, before he found her position, before he put a bullet through her skull. Natalie did not think, did not hesitate, did not give herself time for the fear that was trying to claw its way up her throat. She cycled the bolt, chambered another round, adjusted her aim 2 inches left to compensate for the wind she had miscalculated. Breathed, squeezed. The insurgent sniper jerked backward like someone had yanked a rope attached to his chest. His rifle tumbled from his hands, clattering down the rocky slope. His body followed a moment later, rolling twice before coming to rest in a position that no living person could hold. Natalie lowered the rifle, turned her head to the side, and vomited over the edge of the roof. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the weapon. Her vision blurred with tears she had not known were falling. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, to hide, to be anywhere but here with the weight of what she had just done crushing down on her chest. She had killed a man, ended a life, taken everything that person was or would ever be, and erased it with one precise application of physics and chemistry and trained skill. The shaking got worse. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. For a moment, just a moment, she was 16 again, the bullied girl who wanted nothing more than to disappear. Then Shaw's voice cut through her spiral. "The sniper's down! North Ridge sniper is down!" And Thorne, confused and desperate, "Who took that shot?" No one answered because no one knew. Natalie forced herself to breathe, forced her hands to stop shaking through sheer will. She had made the choice, had crossed the line that separated training from reality. And now men were alive who would have been dead, and that had to mean something, had to count for something. The fighting had not stopped. If anything, it had intensified. Without their Overwatch sniper, the insurgents were coordinating less effectively, but there were still dozens of them against a handful of defenders. She had started this. She had to finish it. Natalie wiped her mouth, blinked away the tears, and went back to work. Through the scope, she scanned the battlefield with new eyes. Eyes that had crossed the threshold. Eyes that understood what Wyatt had tried to teach her. That war was not about wanting to kill. It was about being willing to kill when not killing meant death for the people depending on you. 520 yards to the east, she spotted an insurgent in a red headscarf directing the assault on Shaw's position. His hands moved in clear gestures, tactical signals. Squad leader. Priority target. Natalie settled the crosshairs. The man was moving, pacing behind the burned-out shell of a vehicle as he coordinated his fighters. She would have to lead the shot, anticipate his movement pattern. She watched him for 10 seconds, learned his rhythm, the way he paced 3 steps, paused, gestured, moved again. Predictable in the way that people under stress often became predictable. She led him by 2 feet, squeezed the trigger. The insurgent leader dropped mid-gesture, his red headscarf bright against the dirt even in the dim light. The assault on the eastern approach faltered immediately, fighters looking around in confusion for orders that would not come. 2 kills. 2 men who would never go home. 2 families who would grieve. Natalie pushed the thought away, scanned for the next threat. 680 yards to the southeast, another commander with a radio pressed to his ear. She could see him shouting into it, trying to restore coordination to the attack. The range was longer, the target partially concealed behind a low wall. She adjusted for distance, for wind, for the way the morning light was starting to change the thermal currents. Fired. The man with the radio collapsed backward, the device falling from his hand. The radio chatter she could hear on her own unit went suddenly silent. 3 kills. 3 men dead by her hand. 3 shots that each felt like they were tearing something loose inside her. But the compound was still under attack. The perimeter was still in danger of being breached, and she was the only sniper in position to do anything about it. She scanned the northern approaches again. 540 yards out, a machine gunner had set up a PKM on a bipod, raking the compound with sustained fire. The muzzle flash was bright and steady, methodical. He was pinning down the defenders, making it impossible for anyone to maneuver. Natalie centered the crosshairs on his torso. The PKM was belt-fed, which meant he had ammunition to spare and would keep firing until someone stopped him. She became that someone. Breathed. Squeezed. The machine gunner slumped over his weapon. The PKM went silent. 4 kills. To the northeast, 600 yards distant, a fighter with an RPG launcher on his shoulder was moving into position to target the MRAP where Shaw sheltered. 1 rocket into that vehicle, and everyone behind it would die. Natalie tracked him as he moved, led him by 3 feet to account for his walking pace. Fired. He dropped. The RPG launcher clattered away, unfired. 5 kills. 5 men who had woken up this morning not knowing it was their last day. 5 lives ended by her choices, her skill, her willingness to pull the trigger. The weight was becoming unbearable, but she could not stop. Not yet. She was on her 7th round when the M40A5 spoke for the last time from its magazine, and she felt the bolt lock back on an empty chamber. Reload. The motion was automatic, drilled into her by thousands of repetitions. She ejected the empty magazine, retrieved the second 10-rounder from her vest, inserted it smoothly, released the bolt, chambered around, and then something caught her attention through the scope that made her blood freeze. On the southern approach, Moving with the kind of tactical discipline that spoke of professional training, 6 insurgents were flanking around toward the rear entrance of the base. The entrance that led directly to the building where the wounded were being treated, where Williams might still be alive, where the medic and 2 support personnel were trapped. 740 yards. Moving targets, partial concealment behind rocks and low terrain. And if they breached that entrance, everyone inside would be massacred. Natalie felt time compress into a single crystalline moment of clarity. This was the shot sequence, the one Wyatt had made her practice 500 times until she could do it blind. 6 targets, 15 seconds maximum, 0 margin for error. The drill, he had called it, the one that separates good snipers from the ones who save lives when there is no room for anything less than perfection. She had never failed the drill in training, but she had never done it under fire. Never done it when the targets were human beings. Never done it when failure meant death for the people she had eaten with and worked beside for 4 months. Through the scope, she watched the insurgent breach team moving into position. The lead man carried a satchel charge that would blow the reinforced door apart. Once they were through, it would be over in seconds. Natalie settled into her firing position. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing was controlled. The fear was still there, would always be there, but it had been pushed down beneath layers of training and discipline, and the cold understanding that sometimes the hardest choices were the only choices. She put the crosshairs on the man with the satchel charge. 750 yards. Wind from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. Target moving right to left at a walking pace. Upward angle negligible. Lead the target. Compensate for wind drift. Account for the flight time at this range. She fired. The insurgent with the satchel charge jerked and fell. The charge tumbled from his hands, rolling harmlessly into a depression. Cycle the bolt. Acquire the next target. Team leader turning to see what happened. Through the 6-inch gap between 2 insurgents. Impossible shot. The kind of shot that should not be possible, except Wyatt had made her practice it until she could thread bullets through spaces that seemed too small to exist. She took it. The team leader dropped with a hole in his chest that he never saw coming. 3rd target running now, breaking for cover. 730 yards and accelerate. She led him too far, overcorrected for his speed. The bullet kicked up dirt 2 feet behind him. A miss. No time for frustration. Adjust. Compensate. Re-engage. She tracked him for 2 seconds, learned his new speed, his direction. Fired. He went down hard, momentum carrying him into a tumbling roll. 4th target, 5th target, both trying to reach cover now, realizing they were being systematically eliminated by a sniper they could not see. Natalie fired twice in rapid succession. 2 squeezes of the trigger, separated by the time it took to cycle the bolt. 2 more men dropped. 11 seconds elapsed. 5 targets down. The 6th insurgent had made it to cover behind a large rock, only his head visible. 720 yards to a target the size of a dinner plate. Every sniper's nightmare shot. Except Wyatt had trained her for exactly this. Had told her that sometimes the only way to save lives was to take a shot that seemed impossible and make it anyway. Natalie closed her eyes for half a second, saw her grandfather's face, heard his voice. Trust yourself. Trust the training. You have made this shot 100 times. She opened her eyes, centered the crosshairs on the visible portion of the insurgent's head, calculated every variable one final time, breathed in, let half of it out, held, squeezed. 14 seconds, 6 targets, 6 kills. The breach team was eliminated. Natalie lowered the rifle and realized her shoulder was one massive bruise from the recoil, that her hands were covered in carbon residue from the expelled gases, that she had been so focused on the shooting that she had not noticed the shrapnel wound on her cheek from a mortar round that had struck nearby. Blood ran down her face, mixing with tears in cordite residue. Below in the compound, the remaining insurgents were breaking off the assault, their leaders dead. Their sniper eliminated, their breach team destroyed. The coordinated attack had collapsed into chaos, and chaos could not stand against even a weakened defense. The firing diminished, slowed, stopped. Dawn broke over the Hindu Kush mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that seemed obscene after what had just happened. In that growing light, Natalie could see the bodies scattered across the approaches to FOB Sentinel, could see the men she had killed lying in positions that would haunt her dreams for years to come. 11 confirmed kills. 11 men who had woken up this morning not knowing it was their last day. 11 lives ended by her hand. The weight of it threatened to crush her. She stayed on the roof for 20 more minutes, scanning for any remaining threats, her rifle trained on the empty approaches. Only when she was absolutely certain the attack was over did she finally move. The descent from the roof was harder than the climb. Her legs shook with exhaustion and adrenaline crash. The rifle felt like it weighed 100 pounds. By the time she reached the ground floor, she could barely stand. The compound was chaos of a different kind now. Men shouting, the wounded being moved, Thorne on the radio calling for medevac and reinforcements, Shaw limping toward the medbay with blood soaking through his pants leg. No one saw Natalie slip out of the communications building. No one noticed as she made her way back to her quarters through the smoke and confusion. She returned the M48-5 to its case with hands that had started shaking again, wiped down the rifle with a cloth, removing the residue of 11 shots that had saved the base, locked the case, hid it back in her locker under the winter clothes and spare uniforms. Then she went to the bathroom and washed the blood from her face, changed her shirt to hide the bruising on her shoulder, tied her hair back and made herself look as normal as possible. When she finally walked into the mess hall, Shaw was there, his leg bandaged, his face pale with shock and blood loss. He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. "Kincaid, where the hell were you during the attack? We could have used every hand." Natalie met his gaze, kept her voice level, emotionless. "I was helping where I could, petty officer." It was not exactly a lie, but it was not exactly the truth either. It was the answer of someone who had learned to be unnoticed, who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon was the one nobody saw coming. Shaw stared at her for another moment, then shook his head and turned away, dismissed her as easily as he always had. Natalie walked back to the kitchen, started preparing breakfast for the men who had survived. Her hands moved automatically through familiar motions, while her mind replayed every shot, every death, every choice that had led to 11 men lying dead in the Afghan dirt. She had saved lives. She knew that. Thorne was alive. Shaw was alive. The people in the medical bay were alive. The base had held. But the cost of that survival was written in 11 deaths that she would carry for the rest of her life. In her pocket, she felt the weight of her grandfather's letter, the one she had written last night, thinking she might not survive. She had survived, but something in her had changed forever. The unnoticed girl who just wanted to cook meals and stay out of sight had become something else, something harder, something necessary. Outside, the sun continued to rise over a battlefield she had created, and Natalie Kincaid stood alone in the kitchen of FOB Sentinel, unseen still, while around her the base slowly came to terms with the fact that they had survived an attack that should have killed them all. They just did not know who to thank. Not yet. The sun had been up for 3 hours when Lieutenant Commander Rex Mallory's patrol finally returned to FOB Sentinel. They came in fast, their vehicles kicking up rooster tails of dust, expecting to find a base under siege or worse. What they found instead was silence broken only by the sound of men working to repair damage, to clear debris, to make sense of what had happened in the hours before dawn. Mallory stepped out of the lead Humvee and stopped dead, his eyes taking in the scene with the trained assessment of a man who had seen combat across 3 continents. The communications building showed fresh damage from mortar strikes. The motor pool had a Humvee burned down to its frame. Shell casings littered the compound like brass confetti. Blood stained the dirt in half a dozen places. But the base still stood. The flag still flew, and his men were alive. Thorne met him at the command center, his head wrapped in bandages, his arm in a sling, his face showing the particular exhaustion that came from surviving something that should have killed you. "Report," Mallory said. "Approximately 40 insurgents hit us from three sides at 0347. Mortars, small arms, coordinated assault. They had professional leadership, Overwatch sniper, and a breach team trying to access the medical bay." Thorne's voice was steady, but his eyes told a different story. "We should all be dead, sir. But you are not." "No, sir, we are not." Mallory waited. When Thorne did not continue, he pushed. "What stopped them?" "I do not know." The admission hung in the air between them. Thorne was a veteran of the Gulf War, had been in firefights from Mogadishu to Kabul, and he was telling his commanding officer that he did not know how his people had survived. "Walk me through it." They moved through the compound, as Thorne explained. The initial assault, the overwhelming numbers, the sniper on the North Ridge who had them pinned. And then, somehow, impossibly, that sniper had gone silent. Shaw said the shot came from inside the compound, from elevation, but we did not have anyone positioned for Overwatch. Then who took the shot? "Unknown, sir." Mallory's jaw tightened. "Unknown is not an acceptable answer, Staff Sergeant." They reached the perimeter and Mallory stopped, looking out at the approaches to the base. What he saw made him go very still. Bodies. 11 of them scattered across the terrain at ranges that made his tactical mind work overtime. He pulled out his binoculars and glassed each position systematically. North Ridge, 650 yards, one body, eastern approach. 520 yards, one body, southeast position. 680 yards, one body, north approach. 540 yards, one body, northeast position. 600 yards, one body, and on the southern approach, a cluster of 6 bodies at ranges between 700 and 750 yards. Mallory lowered the binoculars slowly, turned to look at Thorne. "You said you do not know who was shooting." "Correct, sir." "But someone was shooting. Someone with precision sniper training and the ability to make kills at ranges exceeding 700 yards. In low-light conditions, under fire, against moving targets." Thorne said nothing. Mallory pulled his sidearm and handed it to one of his men. Then he walked out of the compound perimeter, moving toward the nearest body with the careful steps of a man who had spent too many years in places where the ground itself could kill you. The insurgent on the eastern approach had been hit center mass, the kind of shot that spoke of proper target acquisition and controlled fire. Mallory examined the wound, estimated the angle, turned to sight back at the compound. The communications building, the roof line. He moved to the next body, then the next, each examination confirming what his training was already telling him. These were not lucky shots. These were not the desperate fire of defenders spraying bullets and hoping for hits. These were the calculated kills of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. When he reached the southern approach and found the breach team, all 6 of them down within a tight time frame, his assessment crystallized into certainty. Whoever had made these shots was operating at an elite level that most snipers never achieved. The precision, the range, the tactical target selection, the ability to engage multiple moving targets in rapid succession. This was masterclass marksmanship. Mallory walked back to the compound in silence, his mind working through the impossible mathematics of what he had just seen. When he reached Thorne, his voice was quiet but hard. "I need a list of every person who was in this compound during the attack." "Sir, I already told you." "The list, Staff Sergeant, now." 10 minutes later, Mallory sat in the command center with a piece of paper that contained 5 names. Thorne, Shaw, Williams, Hayes, Kincaid. Williams had been unconscious for most of the engagement, confirmed by multiple witnesses. Hayes had been in the security office and had neither the training nor the access to weapons that would explain the shots. Shaw had been pinned down behind the MRAP, his position documented by radio chatter. That left two names, Thorne and Kincaid. Mallory looked up at the staff sergeant who stood across from him, wounded and exhausted. "Where were you during the engagement?" "North wall, sir, trying to coordinate the defense." "Did you fire your weapon?" "Yes, sir, approximately 30 rounds at targets of opportunity on the northern approach." "Any confirmed kills?" Thorne hesitated. "Unknown, sir. I was suppressing, not taking aimed shots." Mallory made a note. Thorne was a competent soldier, but his service record showed nothing that would suggest sniper capability, and his position at the north wall would not have given him sight lines to half the bodies currently lying in the Afghan dirt, which left one name. "Corporal Kincaid," Mallory said. "What do you know about her?" "She is our primary food service specialist. Quiet, does her job, no disciplinary issues." Thorne's tone suggested he did not understand why they were discussing the cook. "Marksmanship scores?" "I would have to check her file, sir." "Check it." Thorne pulled up the personnel records on the battered laptop that served as their administrative system. His eyes widened slightly as he read, 99 out of 100 on qualification, second highest score in her cohort. He scrolled further. Multiple applications for Scout Sniper School. All denied. "On what grounds?" "Does not specify, sir. Just shows as application rejected." Mallory leaned back in his chair. "And her next of kin?" More scrolling. Then Thorne stopped, his face going pale as he read something on the screen. "Sir, her emergency contact is listed as Master Gunnery Sergeant Wyatt Kincaid. Status, deceased." He looked up. "I know that name." "As do I." Mallory's voice was grim. "Wyatt Kincaid trained Marine Corps snipers for 25 years. His students operated in every major conflict from Grenada to Desert Storm. He was a legend." The implications settled over the room like heavy weather. "Corporal Kincaid is his granddaughter?" Thorne asked. "Apparently. And you think she—" "I think I need to talk to her. Where is she now?" "Mess hall, sir, preparing midday meal." Mallory stood. "Show me." They found Natalie exactly where Thorne said she would be, moving through the kitchen with the efficient motions of someone who had done these tasks 1,000 times. She was chopping vegetables, her hands steady on the knife, her face composed. To anyone watching, she looked exactly like what her personnel file said she was. A cook, support personnel, someone who existed on the periphery of the real war. But Mallory had spent 20 years learning to read people, and he saw what others missed. The purple bruise visible on her shoulder when she reached for something on a high shelf. The fresh cut on her cheek that looked like shrapnel damage. The way she moved with the controlled precision of someone managing pain. The eyes that were bloodshot, not from lack of sleep, but from something deeper, something harder. "Corporal Kincaid," he said from the doorway. She turned, saw him, and came to attention. "Sir." "At ease." He stepped into the kitchen, letting the door close behind him. "I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer honestly. Were you involved in the defense of this base last night?" The question hung in the air between them. Natalie could have lied, could have maintained the fiction that had protected her for so long, could have disappeared back into the role everyone expected her to play. Instead, she met his eyes and made a choice. "Yes, sir, I was." The admission seemed to take something from her. Her shoulders dropped slightly. The mask she had been wearing cracked just enough to show the exhausted, traumatized young woman beneath. Mallory nodded slowly. "I need to see your service record, the complete file, not just what is in the system." "Sir?" "Humor me, Corporal." 20 minutes later, Mallory sat in the command center, reading through Natalie Kincaid's file with growing incredulity. The marksmanship scores that put her in the top percentile of every shooter in the Navy. The drill instructor's notes recommending advanced training. The 4 separate applications to Scout Sniper School, Each one denied with bureaucratic language that boiled down to the same thing: gender-based discrimination dressed up in official terminology. And then, buried in her personal information, the details about her grandfather that painted a picture Mallory was only beginning to understand. He looked up at Natalie, who stood at attention in front of his desk. Thorne and Shaw had been summoned as well, standing to the side, confusion written on their faces. "How long did your grandfather train you?" Mallory asked. "4 years, sir. Age 16 to 20. "And what did he teach you?" "Everything, sir. Ballistics, wind reading, range estimation, tactical movement, target selection and engagement." Her voice was steady now, matter of fact. "He trained me the same way he trained Marine Corps snipers for 25 years. Shaw made a sound like he had been punched in the stomach. Thorne's face had gone white. Mallory continued. "The insurgent sniper on the North Ridge. Did you eliminate that target?" "Yes, sir. 650 yards. Took 2 shots. First was a miss, wind miscalculation. Second was a kill." "The squad leaders on the eastern approaches?" 520 yards and 680 yards, both kills. "The machine gunner and RPG fighter?" 540 yards and 600 yards, both kills. "The breach team trying to access the medical bay?" Natalie's voice got quieter. 6 targets, 740 yards average, engaged in rapid succession. One miss on the third target, corrected on the follow-up shot. Time to completion, 14 seconds. The room was absolutely silent. Mallory leaned forward. "How many total confirmed kills, Corporal?" 11, sir. "And you made these shots with what weapon?" For the first time, Natalie hesitated. Then, "My grandfather's M40A5, sir. I brought it to Afghanistan against regulations. It is currently secured in my personal locker." Another silence. This one broken by Shaw's voice, raw with disbelief. "You are telling me that ghost girl is the sniper who saved our asses?" Mallory turned on him with an expression that could have frozen plasma. "You will address Corporal Kincaid with the respect her actions have earned, petty officer. Is that understood?" Shaw snapped his mouth shut, nodded. Mallory turned back to Natalie. "Why did you not report your capabilities when you arrived at this unit?" "I tried, sir." Her voice held no accusation, just simple fact. "I applied for Scout Sniper School 4 times. I was denied 4 times. I was told to focus on my current assignment, to stick to my strengths." She glanced at Thorne. "I was told that cooking was valuable, and that I should not waste command's time with requests for training I was not suited for." Thorne looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mallory stood. "Everyone out except Corporal Kincaid." The others filed out. When the door closed, Mallory walked around his desk and did something that surprised both of them. He sat on the edge of it, informal. The barrier between officer and enlisted momentarily dissolved. "My father was a sniper," he said quietly. "He never talked about it much, but when he did, he always said the same thing, that the hardest part was not making the shot, it was living with it after." He studied her face. "How are you doing with that, Corporal?" The question, asked with genuine concern rather than command authority, broke something in Natalie. Her eyes filled with tears that she had been holding back since dawn. "I killed 11 people, sir. 11 human beings who woke up yesterday and did not know they were going to die. I can see their faces. I can see every shot. And I know I would do it again because the alternative was letting my people die. But that does not make it easier. It does not make it feel like anything other than what it is." Which is? The terrible mathematics of war, the kind my grandfather warned me about. Mallory was quiet for a moment. Then, "It is not murder when it saves lives. It is the impossible choice that combat forces us to make. Your grandfather understood that. I suspect he taught you that too." "He did, sir. He also told me it would haunt me." He was right. It should haunt you. The day it stops haunting you is the day you should stop pulling triggers. Mallory stood. "I am going to do 2 things, Corporal Kincaid. First, I am recommending you for the Navy Cross. What you did last night was extraordinary by any measure. You saved this base and everyone in it. Natalie started to protest, but he held up a hand. Second, I am personally ensuring you get into Scout Sniper School. Not applying, not requesting, ensuring. You have proven your capability in the only arena that matters, combat. Anyone who denies you after this is going to have to explain themselves to me, and I promise you I will make that conversation very uncomfortable for them. Sir, I do not need... Yes, you do, because you are exactly what your grandfather trained you to be. And keeping that talent in a kitchen is a waste of resources this country cannot afford. He walked back to his desk, picked up his radio. All personnel, formation in 10 minutes, full compound, no exceptions. Then he looked at Natalie. You have been unseen long enough, Corporal. Time to step into the light. The formation assembled in the central compound under the midday sun. Every person who could walk was there, lined up in rough ranks, confused about why they were being pulled from repairs and rest. Mallory stood at the front with Natalie beside him. She looked small next to the SEAL commander, her cook's uniform rumpled and stained, the cut on her cheek visible in the harsh light. To anyone who did not know better, she looked completely out of place. Mallory's voice carried across the formation without need for amplification. Last night, this compound was attacked by a numerically superior force with professional leadership and tactical coordination. They hit us when we were at minimum manning, when our defensive capability was reduced by 75%. By every calculation, we should have been overrun. He paused, letting that sink in. But we were not. We held. And we held because one person stepped up when we needed it most. One person who had skills that none of us recognized. One person who showed more courage and capability than I have seen in 20 years of combat operations. Mallory turned to Natalie. Corporal Natalie Kincaid, step forward. She did, her boots loud in the sudden silence. Last night, Corporal Kincaid engaged 11 enemy combatants at ranges between 500 and 750 yards. She eliminated an insurgent sniper who had our people pinned. She took out enemy leadership, disrupting their coordination. She neutralized a machine gunner and an RPG fighter who would have killed our defenders. And she single-handedly stopped a breach team that would have massacred our wounded. The silence deepened. Men were staring at Natalie like they had never seen her before. She made these shots under fire, in low-light conditions, against moving targets, with precision that I have rarely seen matched even among our most elite operators. Mallory's voice hardened. She did this after being denied Scout Sniper School 4 times, after being told that her place was in the kitchen, after being dismissed and overlooked by every person in this compound. He looked out at the formation, his gaze finding Shaw, finding Thorne. She did this because she had the training, the skill, and most importantly, the courage to act when action was required. And she did it without asking for recognition or reward. She did it because it was right. Mallory turned back to Natalie. Corporal Kincaid, I am recommending you for the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat operations. I am also ensuring that you receive the advanced training you have earned through both demonstrated skill and combat effectiveness. And I am putting on record that this unit, this command, failed you by not recognizing what you were capable of. He stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Staff Sergeant Garrett Thorne broke ranks and walked forward. His arm was still in a sling, his head still bandaged. He came to attention in front of Natalie. Ma'am, his voice cracked, you saved my life last night. You saved all our lives. And I was wrong. Wrong about you. Wrong about what you were capable of. Wrong to dismiss you and tell you to stay in your lane. Tears ran down his weathered face. I am sorry. I am so goddamn sorry. You are the bravest person I have ever known. Before Natalie could respond, Dalton Shaw stepped forward. He did not just come to attention. He dropped to one knee. I made your life hell, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I mocked you, dismissed you, treated you like you did not matter, and you still saved my life. You still put yourself in danger to protect someone who did not deserve it. He looked up at her, and the arrogance that had always defined him was gone, burned away by the reality of what she had done. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but you have my respect. You have my loyalty, and if anyone ever disrespects you again, they will answer to me. One by one, the others came forward. Williams recovered enough to walk, saluting with tears in his eyes. Hayes, the young private, looking at her like she was something out of legend. The medic who had been sheltering in the building that Natalie had protected. Each of them offered respect, apologies, gratitude. And Natalie stood there, overwhelmed, the tears finally falling freely, and found her voice. I did not do it for recognition. I did not do it for medals or advancement. I did it because it was right. Because my grandfather taught me that being unseen does not mean being powerless. It means being ready to act when no one expects it, when it matters most. She pulled out the photograph she always carried. Wyatt in his dress blues, young and strong, before war and time had worn him down. He believed in me when no one else did. He saw something in the bullied girl who wanted to disappear, and he made her into someone who could save lives. This is not my victory, it is his legacy. Mallory stepped forward again. Fall out. Corporal Kincaid, you are relieved of kitchen duty. Report to me tomorrow morning for training assessment. The formation dissolved, but people did not leave. They clustered around Natalie, wanting to shake her hand, to thank her, to see the unnoticed cook who had become their salvation. She endured it for as long as she could. Then she slipped away, back to her quarters, and finally allowed herself to collapse. 7 months passed. In those months, FOB Sentinel became a different place. Thorne put Natalie's name forward for every commendation he could find, spent hours writing statements about how his bias had nearly cost them everything. Shaw became her most vocal defender, shutting down any disrespect toward female personnel with a ferocity that surprised everyone who knew him. The two men who had dismissed her most thoroughly became the architects of her redemption. The investigation into the FOB Sentinel attack confirmed every detail of Natalie's account. Ballistics evidence matched her rifle. Tactical analysis confirmed the precision and skill required for the shots she had made. The Navy Cross was approved and awarded in a ceremony that made national news. And on a cold morning at Camp Pendleton, Natalie graduated from Scout Sniper School at the top of her class. She broke the existing range record with a shot at 1,180 yards, surpassing even her grandfather's best documented distance. The instructors, hard men who had seen it all, admitted they had never seen anyone with her natural ability. When they asked where she learned it, she always gave the same answer: from the best teacher who ever lived. 6 weeks after graduation, Natalie received orders to DevGru, SEAL Team 6. Not because of politics, not because of diversity quotas, but because her combat record spoke for itself, and the Navy could not afford to waste talent in a world where threats came from everywhere and nowhere. Her call sign, chosen by her teammates, was simple: Ghost. The name that had once been used to mock her had become a badge of honor, because ghosts were unseen until they struck. Ghosts could not be stopped by enemies who did not know they were there. And Natalie Kincaid had proven that being overlooked, properly weaponized, was the most dangerous capability of all. She established the Wyatt Kincaid Memorial Sniper Fund with her first year's combat pay. The fund provided scholarships and training opportunities for shooters who had been overlooked, dismissed, or denied opportunities because they did not fit someone's preconception of what a warrior should look like. Male, female, it did not matter. What mattered was skill, dedication, and the willingness to make the hard choice when the hard choice was all you had. On a bright Saturday in May, Natalie drove her old Ford Ranger to the cemetery in Nebraska, where her grandfather was buried. She wore civilian clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, looking like any other young woman visiting family. The headstone was simple: Master Gunnery Sergeant Wyatt Kincaid, Semper Fidelis. Below the dates of his birth and death, a single line: Teacher of Warriors. Natalie knelt in the grass and placed two items at the base of the stone: the Navy Cross in its presentation case, and her Scout Sniper School graduation certificate, framed and pristine. "I did it, Grandpa," she said quietly, "just like you said I would. I stepped into the light. I made the shots. I saved the lives." The wind moved through the prairie grass with the sound of 1,000 whispered conversations. "It still hurts. The 11 men. I still see their faces. But I understand now what you tried to teach me, that the weight of those deaths is the price of the lives saved. That carrying that weight is what separates warriors from murderers." She pulled out the rifle case she had brought with her, opened it. Inside was Wyatt's M40A5, cleaned and maintained to the same exacting standards he had taught her. Engraved on the stock in simple letters, "Iron's Legacy, 11 Lives Saved, Afghanistan, 2012. I am keeping your rifle, Grandpa, taking it with me to wherever they send me next, because every time I look at it, I remember what you taught me. That strength is not about being seen, it is about being ready. That the best weapon is the one no one knows you have until you need it." She stood, wiping tears from her face. "Thank you for seeing me when I was overlooked. Thank you for making me into someone who could protect others. Thank you for believing in the scared little girl who just wanted to disappear." As Natalie walked back to her truck, her phone buzzed. An email from an address she did not recognize. "Dear Corporal Kincaid, my name is Rachel Morrison. I am 16 years old and I live in a small town in Nebraska. Everyone at school calls me Ghost because I am quiet and do not fit in. I found an article about you online, about what you did in Afghanistan, about how you were bullied and overlooked and became a hero anyway. I do not want to be overlooked anymore. I want to be strong like you. Can you teach me? Or tell me how to start? Please, I need to know it is possible." Natalie sat in her truck for a long time, reading the email over and over. Then she typed a response. "Dear Rachel, let me tell you about my grandfather. His name was Wyatt Kincaid, and he was the best teacher I ever had. He taught me that being unseen is not weakness, it is a choice. And the most powerful moment in your life is when you choose to stop being overlooked and step into the light. I cannot train you the way he trained me, but I can tell you how to start. Find someone who believes in you. Learn a skill until you are better at it than anyone expects. Be patient. Be unseen when you need to be. And when the moment comes, when you have the chance to prove what you are capable of, do not hesitate. Take the shot. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are learning to be strong in ways that no one expects. And that is the most dangerous kind of strength. Stay in touch. Tell me about your progress. And remember, being overlooked is only powerless if you choose to stay that way. Respectfully, Natalie Kincaid, Corporal, United States Navy DevGru. She sent the email, started the truck, and drove back toward the life that waited for her. Behind her, in the cemetery, the wind moved through the grass, and on a simple headstone, the afternoon sun glinted off a Navy cross and a graduation certificate that represented everything a teacher could hope to pass on to a student. The overlooked had become essential. The dismissed had become deadly. And somewhere in the world, another scared girl was learning that strength came in forms that nobody expected. The legacy continued.